Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Welcome, everyone, to the Chasing Giants podcast brought to you by Osseo Gear. Don Higgins, I'm Terry Peer. This episode will air on September 7th, opening weekend of Kentucky, and several other states are going at it already. I saw a social media post of Joe Miles already in the stand this evening while we were recording. But, Don, you mentioned earlier you got pictures of hardhorn bucks this week.
Yeah, I did. I've got actually several bucks have shed velvet on my place, and even other places I've got cameras. So I don't think we're at 50% yet, but I bet you over 25% of the bucks have shed velvet, at least around here, which means 75% still have velvet, but it's coming off daily. So this is about the time when the fall or the shift starts from the summer range to fall ranges as well. So it's in the next 6 weeks or so there's going to be a lot of new bucks show up on a number of properties. So anybody that's listening doesn't have a target buck or shooter buck on their farm or where they hunt yet, there's still a good chance that in the next few weeks something could move in.
So let's talk a little bit about this fall shift as we open up this show. We got a lot of topics to discuss, and make sure you stick around for the second segment. We're going to talk about your recent appearance on the Hunter podcast. I think people are going to want to know a little bit more information that you want to share here to our listeners. But as we look at, first of all, the first thing that happens is, if I understand it right, the summer solstice and that pineal gland starts, that's the trigger for raising testosterone, right?
Right.
So as that velvet sheds, how long does it take, or is it really a science? Is it like a trickle out that all my velvet is shed, now I need to go back to my fall range, or is it just okay, we're going to mosey on over and do it over 6 to 8 weeks?
Well, I think it changes with each individual buck. So just like shedding velvet is spread over at least probably a 3-week period, I think that break off from the bachelor group and moving off solo to the fall range is individual as well. I mean, there's going to be some bucks that are probably doing it right now, the first week of September. A lot
already
more.
Shifting, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's going to be a lot more in the coming weeks, and some of them are still going to be shifting in mid-October. Now, by the 1st of November, it's going to be done, but definitely into October. I mean, there's been a lot of times when I've been hunting early October and still had bachelor groups of bucks come by, 3, 4, 5 bucks together that first week or two of October. And so that shift will continue, but it varies by buck, and it's I don't know if it's the rising testosterone is different in each buck. It may raise faster in one buck than another, and when it gets to a certain point, it causes those bucks to, for one thing, they get more aggressive towards each other, less tolerant of each other as they had been in the bachelor group all summer. And individual personalities, I think, of the different bucks play into it as well. So that shift is not something that just happens overnight. It's a slow process where a bachelor group breaks up, and some of those bucks are going to remain right where they spent the summer. They're not going to shift. And here in the Midwest ag country, from my observations, it's about 50-50. About 50% of them bucks are not going to go very far. They're going to stay close to where they spent the summer, and the other 50% are going to shift to some degree. It may only be a mile or so, and it may be several miles. It just varies by buck, but it happens over a period of weeks, not days. So it's about to start if it hadn't already, and it'll continue into mid-October.
Talk about what our young bucks are doing right now. Are they, when they break off from the bachelor group, are they basically finding their new home range and exploring? And is that 2 or 3-year-old deer?
Well, I was primarily talking about older deer, 2 and older. The younger bucks, the year-and-a-half-old bucks, they were kicked off by their mother back in the spring, right before she had the fawns she had this year. As they approached their first birthday is when they were getting kicked off the mother, and they started basically wandering, just randomly wandering in search of their new home range. And from my observation, that continues, that wandering continues from the time they leave their mother in, say, early May, clear through this entire fall. And the reason I believe that is because typically the year-and-a-half-old bucks that I have on my farm, say the 1st of October, are not here later in the season. They've moved on and new ones have moved in. And I can't tell you how many times in the past there's been a year-and-a-half-old buck early on my farm, and I would think, well, that buck's got the potential to maybe be something. He might have a nice 8-point rack, or he might have some characteristic. Maybe his brows are long for a year-and-a-half-old or something like that. And I think, well, that's one to keep an eye on. But before the late season, that buck's gone. He's just moved on. And it's happened time after time. I remember one particular year there was a year-and-a-half-old buck that his antlers went straight out. I mean, he was going to be super wide. They just went straight out. And he was on the place, even before season, like this time of the year, September, October. He was still around. And then I quit getting pictures of him. But on another property where I had cameras 3 miles away, I got his picture, like later in November and such. So I think with year-and-a-half-old bucks, that search for a home range continues from the time they leave their mother well into the fall. And I think in some cases it probably goes into the next year, as they're young 2-year-olds.
So it's kind of that theory where you say the older the buck gets, his range just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, basically where he gets dialed into where he thinks is safe from a wandering nomad state, basically that first year then.
That's a great observation. I do think that the older they get, that range shrinks. It's largest when they're a year-and-a-half old. With each successive year, it just gets a little bit smaller and a little bit smaller. Now, I don't think that, if a buck lives to 10 years old, all of a sudden he's staying on 5 or 10 acres, anything extreme like that. But I do think at maturity, say 5, 6, 7 years old, I think that range has shrank down considerably smaller than it was when he was a 3-year-old.
But do you think that, you talk about every deer being different, every deer possibly having its own personality with how aggressive that deer wants to be and how froggy he wants to be, and where he wanders, there might be somebody that's going to whip his butt, so he keeps looking more versus, they're out wandering, and some deer might be passive, or they just say, oh, I'll just fit in here and not fight. Humans have different personalities, obviously. I got to think that deer would be the same way.
Yeah, I do think there's something to that. I think it could be that when they show up on my farm, there's some mature bucks here. I mean, I've got bucks in every age class, up to 5, 6 years old, and sometimes even bucks older than 6 years old. And when a young buck shows up here, he's going to be at the bottom of the totem pole, and there's going to be a lot of bucks here that are going to be above him, and maybe that's why I keep seeing these yearlings move on. Instead of just showing up and, hey, this place has got all kinds of food, it's got good cover, it's ideal habitat, I'm going to stay here. That just doesn't seem to happen. I think it's probably some of the social pressure. And, to shift gears a little bit on the whole social pressure thing, I think it was last week's podcast we talked about how this year the buck activity on my farm this summer has been different than any summer in the past. I've had more bucks here than I typically do in the summer, because I typically don't have hardly any unless they're just passing through, and usually it's year-and-a-half-old bucks when I do. But last year I shot more does than I've ever shot before by a pretty wide margin, and my theory was that maybe that had something to do with it. Well, one of our listeners contacted me, and lives over in Pike County, and they shot an extraordinary number of does last fall compared to what they typically shoot. And he said the same thing that he's seen this summer, is that now he's overrun with bucks, where typically in the past, in the summer, he didn't have bucks at all. So, there could be something to you keep your doe numbers down and it builds up the bucks even in the summer. I know if the does are there in the fall, they will attract the bucks. But I'm starting to see that social pressure from these does, it's kind of a double-edged sword. In the rut, it could keep your bucks at home chasing does on your property because you got so many, and he doesn't have to go elsewhere to look. But it could also push him off of the farm. The social pressure could push him off the farm at other times of the year.
Yeah, very interesting. We're recording this on September 5th. I don't know about you, but here in Kentucky, we got a good rain on September 4th, and it softened up that ground just a little bit. It wasn't enough to make it muddy, but it softened it up a little bit. And then we have more rain expected on September 6th. So I went out today and got my fall food plots in, and it's probably the latest I've ever planted deadly dozen. Usually I try to get the brassicas in, Labor Day or before, but went ahead and planted it. Actually, I planted the deadly 13 because I put about 10 or 15 pounds of soybeans in on top of it, but we got all of that in. I want to make sure folks understand something that we're both doing this year. We mentioned it just real quickly last week. I talked to Mike Mitchell at Mike's Mighty Micros. One of the strategies that we can use for fall plots when we're running behind, guys, whether it's lack of water to germinate or you haven't planted late till like I did, as soon as we get germination, flood that stuff with a big mist of Mike's Mighty Micros, and it's going to accelerate the growth and, more importantly, bring the nutrients quickly to that plant and make it as healthy as possible. So I was talking with Mike about it, and he said absolutely, especially with any of the legume family. It's a great option if you're running behind. So for those people who are kind of panicking on not having water or not having their fall plots in, go ahead and go grab you a small bottle of that Mike's Mighty Micros. It doesn't take much on a small, like, quarter acre, fall plot to really give them a boost.
Yeah, and I think we had a question submitted this week. We didn't pick it to read later, but it was regarding the amount of mics to use on these fall plots. And I think the rate is a quart per acre. How much water you mix with it doesn't matter as long as you get a quart of that per acre. So if you've got a quarter acre plot, you're going to use what, about ounces? Or no, 8 ounces.
8 ounces.
For a quarter acre.
Yeah,
so,
and I think his ag recommendation, when you look at his, if you go to his website and look at his agriculture, he's got a spray list on Mike's Mighty Micros. I pulled it off for somebody who asked me the same question the other day. I think you can even go up to 2 quarts per acre across 25 or 30 gallons, basically, because that's what most sprayers for ATVs and stuff are about the size of it. But yeah, I think 1 to 2 quarts per acre, no problem. And you're not talking about that big of investment. I mean, you're talking another $30 to basically give your plots a boost that's going to help them. So might not be a bad idea to try for those of you who are running behind schedule this year.
Well, I have not even planted anything this fall yet. I've got a little bit of clover to drill in with my G-Series drill, and I've got my drone guy coming on Saturday. We're going to do some overseeding in the corn and soybeans, and I even got a permission property where I got permission to do some seeding in standing soybean field, and we're going to do that as well. So need rain bad. You said you got one this week. We have not had rain since July. We got 1/10 this week, and that 1/10 was it was the only rain we've had in several weeks, so we are dry.
Yeah, I know Patrick's actually out I think he's out there right before dark when he got off work tonight, because we're supposed to get rain starting, I think, at like 5 or 6 a.m. And he's broadcasting. He's got his extreme custom blower on his leaf blower out blowing across his soybeans right now from his side-by-side driving around. But his beans are already starting to turn. Mine are still green canopy, so I have not overseeded in corn or soybeans yet. I just did the fall plots that I had in soil charge this spring. So I got to wait till a little bit later, and I'll just go back with oats or a cereal grain for those applications since it's going to be a lot later.
Well, my soybeans are green as could be too, but with the drone guy coming, I'm going to put the seed on and see what happens. And I've got my doubts about the soybean overseeding anyway due to the residual or pre-emergent herbicide I used on them in the spring. My corn is going to do fine. I've done that before, so I don't have any concerns there, but a little bit of concern with the soybeans, but you never know until you try it, so it'll be a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break and listen to a spot from Osseo. I did receive an Osseo package today, and if you guys have not seen it, Joe has a true rain gear now that is in Osseo. So mine came in today, and I'm telling you, where the zippers to vent this stuff is absolutely phenomenal. So make sure you go to Osseo Gear, check out this new rain gear that he has. Don, you're going to want it just for consulting season. I can already tell you it's not that kind of rubbery material that we have to worry about hanging on briars and thorns. So make sure you check that out. I'm really excited. Literally, the package just arrived a few hours before recording, so opened up the box and was stoked to see that in there. So we'll be right back after this message from Osseo Gear.
Osseo Gear was forged by apex predators. Our 2 camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetail's range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters. From our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. Osseo Gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit Osseo Gear and use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
Well, Don, before we talk about the Hunter podcast, let's talk about the upcoming men's retreat this coming week. There's still going to be time for you guys to come out and visit with us in Sullivan, Illinois.
Yeah, I've talked to several people that's going to be there. Lots of door prizes, probably more door prizes than ever. Guest speaker will be our very own Terry Peer on Friday evening. I don't have my card in front of me. I'm sitting at my laptop because my computer crashed this week, so I'm looking for the card for this event.
You keep talking.
It's awesome. So on Friday evening, we have the ribeye supper, a great meal. We sit around the campfire as we listen to the speaker. Then on Saturday morning, we have a big breakfast. And basically, you're not going to go home hungry. And then on Saturday morning, we're going to have a live Chasing Giants podcast, where the audience asks the questions and such. So be a great weekend. Be over by mid-morning on Saturday, and you have your day to go fishing right there at Lake Shelbyville or anything. Go hang your tree stands, get ready for the upcoming season. But if you want to attend, you have the number there, Terry?
Get your pins out if you want to attend. This is so they can be prepared for food, folks. It's really hard to plan these events when you don't know how many people's coming. So contact Curtis at 217-254-1409. We'd love to see you. We'll hang around Saturday after it's over, and then I'm going to be moving some trail cameras on the way back to Kentucky Saturday evening. So that's what my plan is anyway. I'm going to make this whole segment the Higgins Hot Seat segment because you were on the Hunter podcast and it just got released. You recorded it a couple weeks ago, but it just got released here within 2 to 3 days of when our podcast is coming out. And I want you to just talk a little bit about why you wanted to do this and kind of clear the air when you already have a show, but this one with so many listeners. Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I felt like the Chasing Giants listener is pretty much already, on board with Terry and I. You guys have been extremely loyal, got a great following, and I thought that was probably not the audience that needed to hear this message the most. I needed to go and present that message in a place where the listener is probably not as friendly towards myself, and maybe I don't want to call them haters, but maybe a little more negative. And the issue that I wanted to address, I'm sure that most of you listeners have heard rumors regarding me and turning loose captive deer and having a high fence around my farm and a little opening where the deer come out, and that's where I shoot them all, and on and on. Well, these rumors actually trace back to a couple of former business partners. And for the last 7 years, I've kind of just kept quiet and haven't said too much about it. And they've continued to spread these lies. It's basically totally untrue. In fact, I never, ever even had a conversation with either of these guys about turning loose captive deer, anything like that. For whatever reason, I'm not going to try to guess what they're thinking or their reasoning, but they have been spreading these rumors for the last 7 years. And I didn't go on this podcast, this hunter podcast, to bash these guys. I just went on to get the truth out. Basically, if I don't expect these guys to admit that they were not telling the truth. I don't expect these guys to come forward and offer an apology. That's just based on what I've seen out of them the last few years. I just don't expect anything like that to happen. I'm going to have some decisions to make in the coming weeks because I've had all I'm going to take of it. I've had a lot of calls and texts since that Hunter podcast released from supporters, and have even found out more things that I was not aware of in just the last couple of days. There is a lot of texts, emails, verbal conversations that have happened with some very big names in the hunting industry, and these former business partners trashing me and my reputation and my name, and all through false accusations. I don't know where it's going to go from here. It's kind of in their court. I know I'm ready to deal with it however is necessary. I've sought legal counsel a number of times in the last few years about it. I don't like attorneys and court system, that whole way of doing things. But at this point, I feel that the rumors have been so damaging that it's got to be addressed, and I am going to address it. How it gets addressed is going to be up to these former business partners, but I know that there's probably a lot of people listening to this that have heard the Hunter podcast by now and what I had to say. There's probably several that have not heard it. It's episode 267 if you want to listen to it. But the big message for the listeners of Chasing Giants, I want to explain to you guys why I did not share that message on this podcast, and that's because you folks, I feel, are already on my side, if you will. You're already very loyal. I felt that message needed to be heard by a different crowd. The crowd that maybe doesn't know what to think, or they think the wrong thing because of something untrue they heard. So anyway, don't want to drag this on, but for those of you who've reached out after hearing that podcast, I want to say thank you. For those of you who have shared information that regarding these situations and offered your assistance, I want to thank you for that. I hope this doesn't turn into something more than it needs to. I don't wish anything bad on these former business partners. I do wish that they would tell the truth and come clean on everything. Whether they do or not is kind of up to them. But I'm to the point where I am going to address it now. I probably should have addressed it 5 years ago. I just kept hoping that it would blow over and these guys would come to their senses and stop, but they have not. And so at this point, I'm ready to address it.
The bitterness that's in this family's heart about what's happened, it was the biggest blessing for our side because Real World ended up having God put some unbelievable folks alongside of us, and our business has grown. far beyond anything we ever could have imagined. Bigger than what I think it ever would have been if it was in its original hands. Not saying that bad about those guys, but just more people coming in with different talents. And I think it was just a God thing. But the simple fact of it is you've done everything in your power to make him, build a bridge. We even promoted his hunt video on Real World's website, and he got upset with that. But the anger and the bitterness that's in that family's heart towards this side of the camp, especially you, they have two choices to make, and that is they can keep doing what they're doing, and there's going to be evidence put out there that they're going to have to stand up in court and face the music, or they can just make it right like a good Christian man that they claim that they are. And it's not your threat. I'm just on the bystanders. I'm not named in any of this, but I'm telling, I hope that they just come to their senses and do the right thing and squash this thing now, because they're not going to want to see what the other side of this is when everybody is called in with copies of text messages and put on the stand to testify on this stuff. So, like I said, there was a clear separation agreement with expectations about how to what and not to say, and you are the only one that has lived up to that contractual agreement. So we'll see how it ends up. We'll see how much of a stand-up Christian guys these guys are.
Yeah, I honestly, in my heart, I don't wish anything bad on them, but I do. This has got to stop, and I hope they'll do the right thing. The other thing that I want to make very clear is that these guys were never forced out of the company. In fact, 3 of us involved in the company when this separation happened did our best to talk them out of it, and it was 100% their decision. It was 100% them setting the sale price. They've got no reason to be bitter. It was their choice, and I wish them the best, but I will say this. If it comes to they're going to be surprised at some of the people that get subpoenaed. We're not going to ask people to come to court. We're going to subpoena them and make sure they are in court. And I just can't believe that they may get a couple people to lie and say it never happened, but when there's 20, 25, 30 people there that have been subpoenaed, they're not all going to lie about it.
Well, there's one thing that I need to fess up to, and I haven't publicly, because I don't feel it's my place. The guys at the Hunter podcast, I owe them an apology, because I didn't go on social media and bash them or talk bad about them. I always just thought that some of the times, and it was more me being protective to you, like when Eberhart got on there and was bashing you, or Chris Brackett or whoever. I always just got the feeling that they hid behind this. They wanted it to be the Jerry Springer, and they wanted all this drama to drive views. And it just kind of turned me off. Like I said, they've never been critical of Chasing Giants, and I don't want to be critical of them, but I do owe them a tip of the cap, because how they handled that podcast and not trying to steer you or bait you. I was really, really, again, my tip of the cap to the guys at the Hunter podcast. That was not how I was expecting this to go. I figured that they were going to poke and prod and try to create drama, and they did none of that. They just let you talk. They did ask some clarifying questions. They were really curious on the business side of it, which was surprising. But my goodness, the episode was like 3 hours long. I don't know that I would have it in me to do a 3-hour podcast with you. I'll say that. But to the guys at Hunter, they've found a niche, and they've been very successful with their show. They got about the same number of episodes out there that we do. I think they even get up sometimes of the year, do 2 episodes a week. They put a ton of work into it, a ton of money, production time. And I just want to tell them, hey, I'm really happy and appreciate how you guys handled the narrative of this episode with Don, especially when I had a bias going into what I thought they were going to do. And that's shame on me.
I will say that it became a little more personal than I wanted it to, but I did not want to not answer a question. I wanted, at the end of that podcast, I wanted to say that I answered every single question that was thrown at me. I answered it in detail. I didn't dodge any questions whatsoever. And I tried to be respectful of them. I tried to be respectful of my former business partners. I tried to even be respectful of Chris Brackett, who's done nothing but bash me time after time. I've just, in recent years, come to realize that there is a lot of young guys looking up to us. And I don't think I would have handled it this well 5 years ago. If I would have brought it to a head 5 years ago, I think there's been some maturity and mellowing out that's happened in recent years. And if there's a young man seen that podcast or sees that podcast, I want him to see that this is how you handle a conflict. I talked about Chris Brackett and how when I found out Chris Brackett had a problem with me, I went to him directly because, he professed to be a Christian. I am as well. The Bible tells us that if you got a problem with a Christian brother, you go to him one-on-one. And that's what I did with Brackett. He was not too receptive to that. That's on him, not me. But I want to show these young guys, I want to be an example for these young guys in not my past, in my present, because I know in my past I made plenty of mistakes. And if I can save some of these young guys some of those mistakes that I made when I was younger and, get their priorities in order, that's what I want to do. And if I would have gone on that podcast and been, ranting and raving and making, threats of this and that, that wasn't what I did. I mean, I just want to get the truth out. And the truth is, once it's out, these guys admit that they were not honest. Both the guys, the former business partners, both of them have shot bucks on my farm, even from some of the same stands that they bashed me for shooting deer. And yet they don't tell that part of the story. So I don't know. I'm feeling a sense of responsibility to younger hunters that look up to us to set a better example. And I hope that this never ends up in court, but it is going to come to an end real quick.
There's another thing that I want to touch on, and I was scrolling through the comments on the Hunter podcast episode where everybody was commenting, and it's going to be a big, big episode. A lot of people are going to watch, and there's a lot of people, and there's people that just don't agree. That one of the topics was fences, and there's people that don't agree with fences, and I totally appreciate that. But there was several comments in there where it was basically that people don't like our show or don't like us because we're open about our faith. And I want to take this opportunity to tell all of our listeners, thank you. We feel the heat from Satan because we're so vocal. But we're not going to compromise who we are or what we believe in our belief systems. We all posted, everybody affiliated with Chasing Giants TV even posted about Matt McPherson, spending tens of millions of dollars to create a new movie to further the kingdom. And that's the example we've received from guys like Matt, that in all things we do, we glorify him. We put him first. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We get caught up on stuff that we shouldn't. We say things we shouldn't sometimes. But at the end of the day, to all of our listeners, before this episode gets away from us, thank you for supporting us and understanding that our faith and our belief in Jesus and wanting to share the good news is more important than deer hunting. And if that makes one person turn off, hopefully there's one person that comes to know the Lord for it. And we're willing to take that heat if it saves somebody for eternity.
Yeah, amen. I think that the transparency, I'm actually, to be honest, I'm embarrassed that it's come to this with this former business partner. I wish it didn't. I wish he would just had went on his way and was very successful at whatever he chose to do. I wish that if him and I would run into each other on the street or wherever, we would be cordial and shake hands and sincerely wish each other the best. It's really embarrassing that it's come to this, but I'm going to guess that 90% plus of the listeners of this podcast and the Hunter podcast have heard these rumors about me, and it was just time to end it.
It's okay to take up for yourself, Don. You don't have to apologize to everybody about it. I think you handled yourself with class, and our listeners here, I hope that all of them listening will support you and have your back. And again, thank you for letting us have a show, a platform, even a YouTube channel that has a Sunday night prayer time on it and a religious podcast on Wednesday, and you guys still come back for it every week. We appreciate that support. Even our sponsors. It's amazing. We've gotten notes the last couple days from our sponsors about how appreciative they are that we're using this as a ministry. So to those who it's a turnoff to them, we're sorry. We're not going to deviate for the sake of views to dilute that out of our message of what we want to talk about every week. But again, back to the Light of the World movie, Matt McPherson through his nonprofit foundation. So to connect all the dots, the owner of Mathews Archery, he is Matt McPherson, songwriter in Nashville, a lot of different business interests, but he has a foundation that has made a tool, a 2D animated movie telling the story of salvation, and it's in theaters this week. So you guys are hearing this on Sunday. It's in a theater right now. Make sure your local church, your youth minister knows about this so that they can take these kids. We want this movie to be in theaters as long as possible. If they don't sell enough tickets, they pull it, and that's just less people that will be able to watch this thing and have it used as a ministry or an encouragement to them. How about a guy like Matt McPherson that could basically go do whatever he wanted with successful businesses, and he chooses to dump this kind of money into a ministry tool that he will never, ever see a financial return on? It's all a spiritual kingdom gain.
And that's what I appreciate about Mathews. You know, in building Real World, I looked at Mathews, and obviously we didn't have the budget that Mathews had out of the gate, and still don't to this day, and never will. But some of the things that they've done, I think that they are a blessed business without a doubt. And why are they blessed? You know, we've often said on this podcast, if you want to be blessed, be a blessing. And Mathews has definitely been a blessing to many folks around the world. This movie is just the latest thing that they have done. Many folks don't realize it, but they support missionaries all around the world. They have dug water wells, paid to dig water wells in third world countries, and then planted a missionary at that water well. So when the locals came to get their drinking water, the missionary was there to minister to them. And they've been doing this for decades, and you'll never hear them tooting their own horn. It's folks like us that kind of get to see the backside of Mathews, you know, not the side that you see on TV or in hunting magazines, but what goes on behind the scenes. And just really proud to be associated with them. I've been with them for like 25 years now and been approached by other bow companies over that time. And Mathews is just the model company in the hunting industry that we strive to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, a lot of our partners or friends in the industry are the exact same way. You know, Chris Yates, such a great Christian guy. Although he's not a sponsor, a friend of ours, Harold Monk, I actually published a YouTube video where Harold and I sat in a 360 blind for an hour talking about it. And he was talking about how he used the book of Proverbs to start his business, and just awesome conversation. I hope you guys go check that out. But another guy that comes to mind is Brian Kraft, one of the most aggressive and successful business people that I've ever been around. His story is unbelievable. Hopefully one day I'll get to sit in a blind and have the same talk with him so everybody could see the people behind the brand. But we really appreciate him and his company, Midwest Land Group, being so supportive of the podcast, and they sponsor our next segment with listener submitted questions, and we'll be right back.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
Hey, we were listing our sponsors there, Terry. I want to throw out Novix. Jeff Klump, the owner of Novix, a veteran, a good Christian guy. Just really proud to have them on board now, too. So
yeah, all of our sponsors, That's who we look for.
360.
Jake Gingrich, Mike Mitchell, 360.
Yep,
I mean, you go
right
down on the list. If they don't meet that criteria, where they're wanting the kingdom to be more successful than us in the deer woods, then it's not a good fit.
Brenton Firearms, another one. Our Kubota dealer, Brandon Ricketts, there at Covington, Indiana. It's just one after another. We don't have a sponsor whose values do not align with ours. That's one of the first things we look for. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anybody out because every one of our sponsors fits the bill. So anyway, on to their questions. This first one comes from Edward Miller from Lyons, New York. It says, "Hello, Don and Terry. Happy birthday, Don." Well, thank you, Edward. A little bit late now, but I know you when you sent your question in, it was my birthday. But anyway, it says, "You are about a month and a half older than my dad, but the two of you do not share the same love for hunting. My dad taught my brothers and I a few things about gun safety and respect for the game, but he has not since the 1980s or so." I think that should have been not been hunting since the 1980s or so. My mom's side of the family did not hunt much either. You two have been our mentors and great ones at that. I don't know what got us into hunting. The only thing I can think of is it is an instinct, like Gene Wenzel says. What got you and Terry started in hunting, and why don't we hear anything about Don's brother hunting? I think it is interesting how some people have such a passion about hunting while siblings don't share the same thing. Your podcast is inspiring and encouraging. Thanks for taking the time to read my question. Well, Edward, I had an interest in the outdoors from a very, very young age. I'm going to guess it probably started on my grandpa's farm, which is my farm today, ironically. But I remember as a little kid going to my grandpa's, and he was a reader. I mean, he had magazine subscriptions to more magazines than I could count. A wide variety of topics. They'd be farm magazines, but also hunting magazines. I remember Fur Fish Game was my favorite of all the magazines he subscribed to, but he also had Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, Sports Afield, Farm Journal, Prairie Farmer, Progressive Farmer, and that's all he did was read. He didn't watch TV, and when I was out there, the TV was never on. He had a TV, but I'm telling you, that thing was almost never on, and he was reading. So, in the evening time, if I stayed the night, I had no choice. It was read. And so I was picking up those magazines, and even before I could read, I was looking at the pictures, and I developed a love for animals, really, livestock and wildlife. And that's where my passion for the outdoors started. And of course, my grandpa living on a farm, when it was daylight, we was outside doing something, and I just loved it when he had livestock, whether it be cattle or hogs or whatever. I'd love helping him take care of those. And then the creek that was behind the house, I'd love going back there. And I remember when I was 13 years old, I got a single-shot 20-gauge shotgun for my birthday and was out hunting squirrels, anything that was in season. But squirrel season was the first season to open on August 1st here in Illinois. Dove season would come in September 1st. It didn't matter what the season was. If there was a season, I was out hunting it. And it just came naturally, kind of like you described for yourself. It's not like anyone ever pushed me to be a hunter or, have interest in the outdoors. It just came natural. It did not come natural for my brother. He had totally different interests than me. Doesn't make him wrong or me right or anything like that. His interests were just totally different. And even to this day, that they still are. I'm just more of a very simple country boy. I'll wear the same pair of shoes for 6 years to church and to work and everything else. The same jeans I wear every day are the jeans I wear to church. And my brother's not like that at all. He's a little more, I'd call him refined, a little more cultured than me. Whereas I'm a simple country boy, he's got a little more culture, we'll just put it that way, and totally different interests. And, what's very interesting is, like you mentioned, siblings can be so different. And I've seen it with lots of folks. If you talk to Gene Wenzel, who you mentioned, his son, Ken, has very little interest in the outdoors like Gene does. I remember back in the day when when Ken was a kid at home, Gene would send pictures of his son with deer that he'd shot and such, but he just lost interest. The interest was there, or I'm not sure if it was ever there, but he ended up losing it and has no interest today. So I think the hunting bug, it's just in your soul, I guess, or it's not. And if it's not, that doesn't make you a bad person by any means, but some of us have it and some of us don't.
Mine started with my grandfather. My dad didn't hunt. It was all Lester, that I used to go in over holidays, and he would take me hunting with him when I was a little kid, and then got old enough that he supported me and bought me my first rifle, my first camo boots, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't shoot my first deer till I was 18. So it was just, honestly, when I did it was just something I really liked. Same as you, hunting was never part of anything in our family. I have a sister that I don't think has ever held a gun, much less shot one. So, and the odd thing is, I don't have, out of my 3 kids now, none of them really are too awful interested in participating in it. And sometimes I feel guilty because I think maybe the way we're focusing on our goals and hunting makes it not fun for someone like my kids, but no, I think they're just all at different points in their life, in college and with starting their careers, that they don't have time. And I joke with them all the time that nobody wants to take over the family business, so it's just not gonna be able to retire. But I have it all to thank to my grandfather. He was the one that influenced me in it. All right, we'll put the second question up. Why is it? There it goes.
So this one comes from Rob Byler from Gap, Pennsylvania. Says, thank you for the Chasing Giants platform and all the free information you share with us. I'm a longtime listener and user of real-world products. My question has to do with fences that more landowners are erecting to divert deer from neighbors who may not share the same goals when it comes to harvesting big bucks. Since all fences have a beginning and an ending, won't there obviously be more deer traffic at each end where the fence stops, giving the neighbors a great tree stand location? Just wondering if you could give us some real-world situations when a fence makes sense for deer management. Well, Rob, boy, it seems like I've talked about fences more in the last week than I have in the last 3 years. But so fences is something that it's an individual choice. I don't try to push it on anyone. If they're interested, fine, I'll help guide them, but I'm not pushing it on anyone, including my consulting clients. I've shared this on the Hunter podcast the other day that 5 years ago, about 10% of my clients had any interest whatsoever in a fence. Today, 90% are willing to listen and consider a fence. Now, 90% don't have fences. 90% don't have a fence even in their plan, but they will at least listen, whereas a few years before they didn't. You bring up a great point in that a fence is going to be it's going to create a funnel on both sides. If it's on a property line, you could absolutely be funneling those deer right to your neighbor and doing as much harm as good. You got to be really careful where you end your fences. That's probably the best way to put it, because and here's the big thing about fences. To be honest, I really don't like fences. I don't. But they are necessary in some situations to get age on your bucks. Without them, the bucks are just going to get killed. And that's why fences are coming up. People are not building fences. I mean, they'll build them to keep deer out of their plots while the plots are growing and things like that. And there's some diversion fences where they'll funnel deer around the ends. But, these property line fences, I wish they didn't exist and didn't have to exist. But as long as our state game agencies are going to refuse to manage for a quality herd, they're just going to grow in number and in popularity and in acceptance. And, the bad thing about the the poor management by these states who refuse to manage for a well-balanced herd, well-balanced in terms of age structure, sex ratios, and things like that. They want to manage for numbers only. They want to keep the deer herd at a certain level, and I understand that, but they could do that, whatever level they're trying to achieve, they could do that and still have a well-balanced herd with mature animals as well as animals in each age class. For whatever reason, they just refuse to do that, and that is causing a great divide in the hunting community. And when a guy goes out and he has a desire to kill older, mature bucks, and he's spent a bunch of money on property, hundreds of thousands, millions maybe of dollars, and then he's doing, countless hours of work throughout the entire year on habitat projects, planting his food plots, and whatever, building hunting blinds, whatever he does. And then all his efforts are destroyed by some guy across the fence who doesn't even own the land. He's just there by permission only, and he shows up and he destroys this person's efforts. Can you really blame him for spending a few more dollars and getting that fence up to grow some of those bucks to the age classes that he desires? And that's the fence argument. I've never hidden the fact that I got a fence on one side of my farm. I had to. I'm just losing too many young bucks to a little 5-acre property. The owner himself does not even hunt, but he was letting anybody that wanted to, and then they were shooting deer as they came off of my sanctuary. As soon as they shot them, they ran back into my sanctuary, and enough was enough. It's an issue I had to address, and that's my fence speech.
Yeah, if you want to hear more, there's about an hour worth on Hunter Podcast. Go out and watch it.
Our next question comes from Ben Sweeney from Waukon, Iowa. It says, hey, Don, touching base on the topic of deer bedding in switchgrass, out of all the properties you visit, how many of the farms actually have true stands of switch opposed to CRP that is typically scattered other warm season grasses and normally isn't thick enough for big bucks to lay in during late fall and winter when it's laid down, unlike full stands of switch? Now, I'm telling you what, that was a sentence. That whole thing was one sentence. To be honest, I have never consulted on a property that when I showed up had a good stand of switchgrass already there. Now, there's properties that had switchgrass. Typically, the problems that I see are the patches are really small, or they're strips like along a wood's edge, where they've tried to feather the edge or whatever, or provide some screening, so they'll plant a narrow strip along that edge. I can't recall a single, and maybe there's a client listening that will remind me that, hey, what about my place? But I cannot remember a single switchgrass planting on all my consulting visits that I thought was a switchgrass planting for bedding cover. I've said many times I think they need at least 5 acres, and the bigger the better. And I would rather have 40 acres if I had room for it than 5. But that's my switchgrass.
Well, that was one sentence for one question. Now we have an essay to read on this one. Hopefully you can read it.
Yeah, so this one comes from Thomas Stein from Caledonia, New York. Says, Don, is an avid outdoorsman and whitetail advocate. I appreciate all you and Terry do in the hunting community and within your communities. You really give us hope that there is a voice for our future and our children's future in the hunting community. My question is, how do you make the decision to kill a buck on your farm? I want to know your thought process. Does the buck's home range influence your decision to what age you think he can live to? Is it purely age? Is it age with antler size? Do you think to yourself, he added 15 inches this year, maybe he'll do it again next year? This question is stemming from within. I am struggling within myself about shooting a 5.5-year-old this year. We have a very much above average farm in New York State for whitetail hunting, but we do run into poachers on this specific parcel. And with the new law just passed this August, crossbow will now be open all 6 weeks of archery, making deer season now October 1 to January 1 here. Also on our farm, not this specific parcel, our farm pushes heavily but miraculously 150-inch plus 5-year-old bucks still grow and survive year to year. We've even taken a 200-inch off the farm. The current buck I'm struggling with is a 5.5-year-old, at most, 8-point frame, close to 160 inches, who made a 15-inch jump from his sheds. I told myself unless I video him with a bow, he's off limits for myself, but I have 2 other hunters who may educate and run him off also. But he is very visible from the road, and someone did poach in there last year. With the liberal New York State laws, this person will have no problem sneaking in again. Please, Don, if you could, walk me through your strategy and thought process. God bless and keep safe this season. Well, Thomas, you've mentioned a lot of the factors that play into a decision. The age of the buck, his rack, his home range. You're only going to be able to grow and hold so many deer on your farm, and those you need bucks of every age class. So, you're not going to have, if your farm, let's just say, for example, it's big enough to hold 10 bucks, you're not going to have 10 bucks that are 5.5 years old. You're going to have, a couple 1.5 years, a couple 2.5 years, a couple 3.5 years, and on. What I tried to do is manage my farm so that these older age class bucks, say from about 4.5 on, are the better bucks that were on my farm in that age class. For example, if I've got 6 bucks 3.5 years old, I want to kill at least 3 of them, if not 4 of them, and let the best 2 or 3 move on. Then you've got room for those younger bucks to come on. And it's about playing the odds. It's really impossible to say which bucks are going to be the best when they get to maturity, but those first racks, those 2- and 3-year-old racks, especially a 3-year-old rack, if a buck is going to be a giant, you're going to know it by the time he's 3 almost every time. There's going to be a rare exception here and there, but almost all the time you're going to know it when he's got that third rack. And at that point, I'm making a lot of decisions on regards to how long a buck's going to live. And there are bucks that are borderline. It's like, do I shoot him? Do I let him go? And I'm back and forth. And a lot of times I'll give them bucks another year and, let them see what they do at 4. But by 4, that's the last chance. If they're not really showing stuff at 4, they've got a target on their back, and I'm hoping somebody shoots them. But you just got to look at each individual buck. You also got to look at what else is available on your farm. I mean, if that's the best buck on your farm, he's 5.5 years old. The buck you described with an 8-point frame, and he's put on 15 inches this year, I would lay odds on it. If I had to put money on it, I would say he's not going to put 15 inches on again next year. Not with an 8-point frame, unless he's got just a bunch of stickers. The odds of that happening are pretty slim.
It's hard to get an 8-pointer up over 160, 165. I mean,
yep.
You got to have a lot going on with mass, time length, and spread and beams to get that much inches out of an 8-pointer.
I don't have a 160-inch 8-pointer on my wall, and not sure that I've seen maybe a couple of them. I'm not telling you what to do. You know your situation way better than I do, but I would consider shooting that deer and making room for another up-and-comer to take his place.
Well, we're an hour in. Do you want to save the number 4 and 5 question to next week, or do you want to run it a little bit long?
Well, I've been on podcasts so much lately that I wouldn't know how to act if I took these headphones off and went to bed. We might as well keep going.
All right. 3 hour long. I can't believe it was that long.
Yeah. This one is from Ralph Hartman from Roanoke, Kansas. Says, Don and Terry, love the podcast and everything you guys stand for. It is a refreshing break from the garbage the hunting industry has become. My question comes from the large number of new whitetail consultants who seem to be popping up everywhere. Every one of these guys are someone I have never heard of, and most seem to not have any or only a couple of mature bucks to their credit. I can't imagine why anyone would hire some of these guys. What are your thoughts on all these new people getting into whitetail consulting? Is this a good thing or a bad thing for our sport? It seems to me that these guys are probably not offering the best advice. Just curious about your thoughts. Thanks. Well, Ralph, my reply is probably going to surprise you a little bit. I encourage people to chase their dreams, and Terry does the same. Whatever your dreams are, we say all the time, dream big. God's reality is bigger than your imagination. So I don't want to discourage anyone from chasing their dreams, and if their dream is to be a whitetail consultant, good for them. And I wish them the best, and I wish them success. I do think that a lot of these guys should probably wait a few more years and get a little more experience under their belt. But I'm not talking about any one person in particular. And to be honest, I don't know the details about a lot of these guys. I don't know where they're from, what they've shot, what properties they've managed or owned, what types of success they've had building a property. So I'm really not in a position to criticize whatsoever. Chase your dream. I wish you the best of success. I know we've got all the work that we can handle pretty much. I know it, especially Terry and I and Wes, we get booked solid every year. Our other guys are getting more and more work every year. They're this might be the year that they're all booked full as well. So it doesn't hurt us for these guys to get in the business. I can say that I know that some people in my camp are not going to like this, but one of the things that Terry and I are going to be involved in this winter is the real world, I don't even know if we have a name for it yet, Whitetail Land Management Summit, for lack of better words at the moment, where we're going to be sharing a lot of information that an up and coming land manager could really probably gain a lot of knowledge from. It's going to be held in conjunction with or as part of our real world dealer event. So you're either going to have to be a real world dealer or a guest of a real world dealer to come to that event. But, I don't think that sharing knowledge is a bad thing. I think people are hungry for knowledge. So I don't feel bad about sharing some things. I'm not going to share every little detail of everything we do. But I don't know. The older I get, the more I like helping people. My dreams have been so far exceeded from anything that I thought I would ever accomplish in my life that I really hope that I can help other people reach that level and, maybe think back one day that, I got my start because I was listening to this podcast 25 years ago, and there's these two clowns on there, kind of crude sometimes. They were good Christian guys, but you never know what they was going to talk about. And Don and Terry, and they gave me the idea that I should chase my dreams, and look what happened. Look what I've done for my family and all that. The older I get, that's kind of the mindset that I've taken, and I don't mind these new guys jumping in at all.
I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you pushing me. I didn't want to be on a podcast. I didn't want to be a land consultant. I wanted to run the business on the backside and never be in the public eye whatsoever. And, you really encouraged me and pushed me and challenged me, and it's been just a huge blessing for our family. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, look at the blessings that others have received because of this podcast and our joint ventures that go the Lester's feet. The logo sit right there behind you on the wall touched a lot of people. I know we're not ready to share it yet, but you had a fantastic idea the other day for a fundraiser for Lester's feet that I guarantee you will get people excited. It might take us a while to get the details worked out, but when it does happen, I think it's going to be huge. But just look at the people that we meet at the shows and things like that. I just had lunch today with Al and Joe and Dwayne, and you came up, your name came up. You was discussed heavily, Terry. Your ears were probably burning, but you've been a blessing to all four of us that were sitting there at that table. And I mean, here we are, four guys that don't even live in the same state as you do, and you've made a big impact on all of us. So I think that sometimes I know I'm guilty of this, is that we let the negatives in the industry and in this life, really outside the hunting industry, get us down. I'm probably as guilty of that as anyone. I take criticism to heart and let it get me down, but we've got a lot of supporters out there too, and if we can help some of these listeners achieve their dreams and achieve so much more than they ever thought possible, let's do it.
Yeah. All right, last question. We're running behind, but we might as well milk it all the way out and get it done. Well,
I'm sure we're going to be under 3 hours, so we've already done this one, Terry. That's the one we just did. I think we're done.
Yep, we're done then. Sorry. Well, I did get good news today. For those of you who had not heard, our good friend Brent Henderson was taken in for open heart surgery this week. As this recording is done, I talked to his wife Stacy, and he was out of surgery by early afternoon and got a long recovery. His whole hunting season is going to be scrapped as he recovers from open heart surgery. God is good. He's faithful. There was a lot of people. We didn't know the details of it when we recorded the last show, so we didn't mention too much of it. But he actually had surgery on Friday, September 5th. All went as planned, but he has a long road of recovery, and Stacy's taking a lot of time off work to be able to help him. So continue to keep Brent in your prayers as he comes through this recovery. It's for a guy that's in as good a shape as him, it's kind of scary for guys like me if he's got a ticker problem, because I don't think my Cheetos are going to be too good of a friend by the time little Debbie season rolls around and hunting season.
Well, we definitely want to keep Brent in our prayers, and also Jason Beachy, JB's feed there in Ohio, having some serious health issues. So keep both those guys in your prayers. And if the rest of the Chasing Giants family, if you got prayer requests, send them out. We may not list everyone on the podcast, but we'll see. Certainly, Terry and I will keep you guys in our prayers.
You want to hear a cool story before we get done, even though we're running late?
Yeah, I do.
So everybody knows we've talked about Emerson Day before. She's a Christian music artist that listens to our show, very loyal, big outdoors woman. Her and her family hunt, fish. We'll have to have her on the show to talk about her accident at some point. I really want people to hear this because it's inspiring. But she wrote this song called Middle of a Miracle, where it's about families dealing with the wreckage, but understanding that God's going to use it in some way, shape, or form. Just a fantastic song. And she lets Lester's Feet use it without any copyright fees or anything as part of our ministry to families. And we use it on Dad's podcast and different things. Check this out. This is how God works. Some lady who is going through a sick child situation sent Emerson a message thanking her for writing this song and how much it encouraged her. And Emerson responded to her and offered to pray for her and said, "Oh, by the way, I have some friends who have a hunting podcast, and they have a nonprofit foundation that helps families in your situation." Emerson actually connected the dots, and we're actually helping that family this week. So I love how this organization has grown through our listeners. True grassroots through the church, and that's just so special. So we appreciate that. And before you close this out, make sure you stay tuned to the end of the show today. Devin Hurley, the minister at Antioch Church of Christ in Grant County, Kentucky, is going to do our Sunday night prayer time this week. So make sure you stay tuned for that after Don closes us out.
Yeah, I just want everybody to know how much we appreciate you. I apologize for all the drama that we went through earlier in the podcast here. But anyway, you guys are really appreciated. God bless and have a great week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey everybody, hope you all are doing well. Good to see you, good to be back with you. You may see that the scenery behind me is a little bit different. My family and I are on a trip to Gatlinburg this weekend for a long weekend. And I have the privilege to come to you with Sunday night prayer time from here. So I'm going to dive into just a quick little lesson, if you will. A couple passages of scripture I really want to bring us to. A couple in Matthew, and then one in the book of 1 Timothy. And one of the things I want to talk about is honestly the issue of money. It's a subject that not a lot of people like to talk about, but at the same time, the Word has a lot to say about it, and I think that we should look into it to see what it is our Lord has to say. You know, if you are on social media at all, or if you really kind of research the news or whatever it may be, and you kind of look around in the world today, you find that there is this growing sort of entrepreneurship that's taking place, which is not a bad thing by any means. But what I mean by that is that I find a lot of videos on social media nowadays about how to grow wealth and how to become wealthy and how to, you know, do all of these sort of things. And, you know, for a long time, everybody's always been doubled down on their 401k and the retirement plans and all of that stuff and whatnot. And those are great things and wonderful things. And there's nothing wrong with that to a point. But the Bible does have some warnings that it heeds to us concerning our desire to be wealthy, our desire to make money, and those sort of things. And I want to take you to a couple passages of Scripture here. The first one would be in 1 Timothy. And here is what Paul writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10. He says this. He says, "Now godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." And then there's also a passage, a parable really, or not a parable, but it really took place with Jesus in Matthew chapter 19, verse 16 through verse 24. And I'll sort of just paraphrase it just for the sake of time. This story is about the rich young ruler. And rich young ruler goes up to Jesus and he asks Jesus, he says, "Good teacher, what must I do to have eternal life?" And if you know the story, Jesus looks at the man and he gives him some sort of, not the, I don't want to say the correct answer, but he sort of kind of sidetracks it a little bit. And he says this in verse 17. He says, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, and that is God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus just named a few. Now, again, if you know the story, the young man looked at Jesus and he said, "Well, I've kept all of these from my youth. What is it that I still lack?" And Jesus said to him, "If you want to be perfect," he said, "go sell what you have, go to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and give it all to them." He says, "Then come follow me." And then in verse 20 it says, verse 22 it says, "But when the young man heard him say this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Assuredly I say to you, that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven." Verse 24, "And again I say to you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Now there are just a couple of warnings there that we find in Scripture. You would also even go to Matthew chapter 6, and Jesus gives another warning as his ministry is beginning, and he gives in Sermon on the Mount. He says, "No one can serve two masters, for either you will hate the one and love the other, or else you will be loyal to the one or despise the other." He says, "You cannot serve both God and mammon." And mammon refers to material possessions. It refers to money. It refers to really anything in this material world that we live in. And so the warning is really this. Be careful, for one, on your desire to want to be wealthy, your desire to be rich, your desire to have more than really what you need. Paul makes a great point in that passage in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Because he says in verse 6, and this is how he kind of sort of sets up what he's about to say in the following verses. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. Godliness coupled with contentment is great gain. And then he says in verse 7, we brought nothing into the world, certainly we can carry nothing out. In this material world that we live in, it is very dangerous. And I know we don't often think about it that way, maybe. There's sort of this notion, even in the Christian world today, just as there was with the Jews in their day when Jesus is saying these things and when Paul is saying these things, that if you have an abundance, especially of material goods, possessions, wealthiness, money, that it's sort of a blessing to you from God. And that could possibly be true. It's not that that those things can't be blessings by any means. But I don't know how often we look at it as sort of a barrier, when in reality it can be a barrier. Sure, those things can be blessings, but at what measure is it a blessing before it becomes a barrier? And I think we need to be very careful with this. Paul says that it's not money itself, it's not materials itself that are bad, it is the desire for them, it is the love for it. And that is where we really need to be careful. Paul again says in verse 9, he says, those who desire, and he's very strict when he says this. He doesn't say those who have a desire might fall into temptation or could possibly fall into a snare or a trap, but he says those who desire to be rich fall into temptation. It almost has a guarantee. And folks, I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely true, because the more that you have, the more things that you possess, you sort of have this mind that maybe you have all the control, and your dependency is really on you rather than on Christ. And that is one of the major dangers. Those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. That is a harsh warning that comes to all of us. And remember, when Paul is writing this, he's writing this to Timothy, and not just to Timothy only, but for those who sit under Timothy's teaching. And so what we got to remember is this is not a message to the world. This is a message to believers. Beware, be careful, understand the seriousness of this, understand the importance of this, understand that you can easily fall into a trap over material things, possessions, thinking that you need more, desiring to be more. Because let's face it, if you're so focused on your business, if you're so focused on your 401k, if you're so focused on your retirement, if you're so focused on those sort of things, what inevitably will happen is you will begin to lose more focus on Christ, on His Word, on His mission, on making disciples, and those sort of things. And you may for a while be able to sort of tote the line doing both. But eventually, one will overpower the other. And that's exactly what the Lord says in Matthew chapter 6. You cannot love both. You cannot desire to have both. The Lord may bless you with an abundance. But seeking to be more than what God has intended for you can be very dangerous. And so I'm just warn you of that this week. I'm sitting here in Gatlinburg right now, and we're at an Airbnb, and there are hundreds of them, thousands of them around where we're at. And you sit there and you think to yourself, man, I bet they make a lot of money doing something like this. And perhaps they do. But at what point is enough for one? And at what point do we see Christ as more? And at what point are we content? Those are some things to think about this week. Something that's really been on my heart. You know, as you get older, you want to think about retirement age. You want to think about your kid's future. And again, none of those are bad things at all. But there's a very fine line, and we must be very careful. So I would give you that warning here this week. Would you close with me in a word of prayer? Father, we thank you for all that you have given us. Father, we thank you for the blessings, whether it be material blessings, Lord, but even more so spiritual blessings, all the things that come down from the heavenly places that you bestow upon us through the Holy Spirit. Father, may you teach us to be content. May you teach us to understand your word, Lord, and not just be hearers of your word, but doers of your word also. For being doer of your word is much more important than just hearing it and not applying it at all. But Lord, you make a couple remarks on this issue of money and material possessions in Scripture. And Lord, you don't say that those things are bad, but what you do say is that they make it very difficult for a man to see Christ, for a man to enter into the kingdom, because those things can so easily pull us away from what is good and godly and holy. And Lord, as Paul said, they can lead us into many harmful lusts and distractions, and Lord, all the way down to perdition. So Father, may we heed this warning. May we understand its truth. May we be ever so aware of it in our own life. And Lord, may we more than thinking about retirement, more than thinking about our 401ks, more than thinking about how we can be more wealthy and have our great life and a great future and those sort of things, may we understand that what is a truly good and godly and great life is doing what your word says, and that is making disciples of all nations. Lord, may that be our strength. May that be what we think about more than anything else. Father, I pray all these things in your holy and precious and wonderful name. Amen.